I think the government has a role to play in ensuring that the basic goods and services are affordable for the masses.
When it comes to personal finance, there's a certain part of personal responsibility that we have to undertake on our own.
Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome back to Heart of the Matter. I'm Otelli Edwards, sitting in for Stephen Chia today. Now, it has become quite common, to hear people say, I can't believe a soft drink and a bag of chips cost me $6, or how a plate of, our favorite Thai fan or rice with dishes has now set you back by $8 at the food court. And we're not even talking about cars, houses, tuition for kids, that sort of thing, so you get the idea. Broadly, the blame falls on inflation, where economic forces outside of our control are pushing up prices and making things far more expensive than, say, some of us can afford them. And everyone is affected. Businesses facing higher costs or increasing costs, plus GST will increase to 9% next year. So while we know that things in general are getting more expensive, on today's episode, we want to find out if cost of living concerns affects everyone the same way, and also the extent to which it's an issue which we can navigate our way through, perhaps with government support, but also through the way we manage our finances. And here with me to chat more about this, a senior lecturer, Ong EeCheng, at the Department of Economics at the National University of Singapore.
Hello.
Ava Gao, a parenting coach and mother of two.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Loh Yong Cheng, lead of advisory team at Providend.
Hi, happy to be here.
Well, thanks very much for joining us today here on Heart of the Matter. So let's just break down exactly what high cost of living means. And it means different things to different people. But one thing that we cannot sort of control would be inflation. Basically, global events, geopolitical issues that's causing our daily costs to go up. Help us understand here, EeCheng, how exactly do all these geopolitical and economic issues impact our must-haves, our necessities?
So I think you touched on it, right? The war in Ukraine and now the war in Gaza. And of course, everyone knows about the COVID lockdowns suppressing supply chains, and then the pent-up demand after that, which is arguably fueled by government handouts. What is much less talked about is the fact that firms have bargaining power. Firms have market power. They can dictate the sort of prices that they're going to set. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York surveyed 700 businesses, and they asked these firms, how do you set prices? What factors do you consider? And over 80% of the firms said that, one of the main things we look at is the strength of demand. So in economics, we call that the price elasticity of demand. When prices rise, how do consumers respond? So for example, let's imagine I'm a firm. I want to raise prices by 10%. Consumers may probably cut back on their purchasing, right, their spending. Are they going to buy 10% fewer? Are they going to buy 5% fewer? Are they going to buy 15% fewer? If they cut back on the spending, but they don't cut back by more than my increase in price, I still come out ahead. I make more profits. There's been very little done in Asia, but studies in the US and Europe have shown that multinational corporations, they're making bumper profits. So on the earnings calls, they're like, hey, this is great. We're making, we're hiking up prices. Consumers are still buying. We're making huge profits. The workers, not so much, right? And consumers get hit because they have very little negotiating power.
And I'm glad you brought up this point, EeCheng, because I just want to pull up a stat here. According to SingStat, household expenditure in Singapore has steadily increased, averaging about $4,900 in 2018. People are still buying stuff online, shopping, buying cars, trying to book restaurants at all these hot tables, and traveling obviously as well. So can you just help us understand? It seems like there is this so-called paradox, would you say, that despite rising costs, people are complaining about it, but they are still spending?
I'm sure that after the pandemic, there's a lot of pent-up demand for traveling. And then traveling has sort of become like expectations. We're also seeing people spending more, consuming outside more. But at the end of the day, like what she mentioned, as a consumer, we're really at the mercy of the companies that we purchase our goods and services for. And depending on where you stand, because if you are an investor, you benefited from the gains of the company. It's true that cost of living is giving quite a bit of concerns for the lower wage workers, for the for the lowest salary families, also for the sandwich generations, for people like myself who are, we have to take care of our parents. We also have to make sure that the children are well taken care of. So it's true that we have to consume more in order to have a decent life in Singapore. Yeah.
And Ava, you are a parenting coach as
Yes.
well as a mother of two. You feel this higher cost of living where things are a bit more expensive. Which are the various sectors or area where you feel like, wow, I'm really feeling this pinch?
In terms of weekly expenses like grocery shopping, definitely as a middle income family, we do see an increase in costing for that. I think in terms of healthcare costs, because as a sandwich generation, I do have elderly parents who have some healthcare issues in the past 2 years. So I've seen like a significant increase in terms of our, costing overall. As a family, we do see also like utilities as well. I mean, we obviously have seen quite a huge jump because of everything that's happening in the past 2 years of the oil prices and the war that's happening. So our utilities has doubled for the past year. So that has been something that we have noticed as well on a day-to-day basis.
EeCheng, just bring us back here to the fact that we've mentioned that inflation is something that we can't quite control because of all these geopolitical factors. But what are the areas that are, say, beyond the government's control, and where are the areas that the government can actually help?
It is true that there are macroeconomic factors, socio-political events, but at the same time, you have firms setting excessive profits, right? So that actually has been something that economists have been talking about for the past 10, 20 years. Well, I call it the paradox of capitalism. So we operate in a capitalistic society, which we think is the best thing since sliced bread, right? Everyone has free will. You can do whatever you want. You can buy whatever you want. You can sell whatever you want. And may the best producer, consumer win. So capitalism, one of the tenets is that we have competition. Firms are free to enter and exit the market. They can compete. And then the company that produces the most innovative product, the best quality product at a suitable price point, they will win. And deservedly so, right? The problem with that is once they win, what happens? They start accruing market power. They have a larger and larger share of the pie. They start to be able to dictate the terms. They start to buy out their competitors. They start lobbying governments for more favorable regulations. And this is really the paradox of capitalism. If you look around our landscape today, just go to the mall, right? Go to the food court. What do you see? Go to Orchard Road. You see big brands. You see basically huge companies with billions of dollars in revenue. You see franchises. It's very, very hard for the small company to come in and compete even when they have a very good product. Because sooner or later, and I've noticed this with, for example, gelato brands. I've noticed this with...
It's $8 for a cone, for a single scoop.
yeah, I've noticed this with dog treats, right? You have these very small, innovative brands coming in, and they do great for about 10 years, maybe even 15 years. And then what happens? They get bought out.
Are you then saying that this is an area that the government can control? I mean, but if the smaller companies, they agree to be bought out, I mean, where does that go? Where do we go with that?
And again, this is a huge debate that's been raging. So governments do have a role to play in terms of regulating competition and banning mergers. And again, here is where economists actually have a lot of blame on their shoulders because they encouraged mergers. They thought that it made sense. It makes sense from the producer's point of view because there are economies of scale. As you scale up, you produce more and more, your average cost gets driven down. The Singapore context, you just think about what happened when Grab first entered the market. And people were very happy, right? Because instead of paying, like $25 for a taxi ride, now you pay $10. And then Grab bought out Uber and prices went up. And fair enough, Grab and Uber both slapped with hefty fines. But at the end of the day, if you can pay these fines and still get a hit, what does that tell you? That tells you that the company itself, they are making huge profits. They get to dictate the terms that the drivers must accept. So these are the workers. And then as consumers, we are left with not very much options, right? You want to pay a little bit more, or you want to spend an extra hour on public transport?
That's right. And I mean, obviously, cost of things, it's all tied in, with our wages. Again, on November 7th, the Senior Minister of State for the Manpower Ministry said that real median income in Singapore fell 4.5% in the first half of 2023. And this basically happens because prices went up faster than how much people were getting paid. Yeah, help us get a sense of understanding. I mean, when you're providing financial advice and all of that. I mean, is that what people are complaining, that they're really feeling that their wages are just not matching up to what they're paying for, say, the gelato, that scoop of gelato, for instance? Yeah.
I guess the common notion is that our wage will never increase in terms of how we expect we expect the salary to be. So that's like a common grouses that all of us will have, right? We always expect our salary to be
But it's not
higher
matching up to inflation.
Correct.
No. So that is the issue, right?
Correct. So in this case, I think in the last 2 years, we have 2 difficult years of high inflation. That's where when the statistics came out that our real salary rate rise is negative, right? Because when we adjust it with inflation, it's negative. It is true that that the salary has not gone up. I mean, the statistics shows that. But I also feel that when it comes to personal finance, there's a certain part of personal responsibility that we have to undertake on our own. Yes, we might not be able to control how our bosses are giving us the salary increase, but when we look at our expenses, we can manage some expenses through our budgeting effort. For example, when I have my firstborn, because I was complaining about like how milk powder is so expensive, right, from the international brands, I spent about 10 minutes in front of in the supermarket aisle. I took the house brand from FairPrice, and then I took at the international brand. And then I turned all the milk powders tin around and look at the ingredients. I came to a conclusion that it's comparable, and then I decided that I think my kids will be okay with using house brand, and the source of origin is about the same, right? So, for example, that's maybe one part of myself trying to manage expenses. There are helps coming from the government. Through cost of living packages, through assurance packages. These do help, may not help in entirety, but these do help in terms of lowering our cost of expenses. For example, if I were to share again my own experience with USave rebates, it does give me a sense that sometimes of my months that I am not paying utilities, right? Because the USave rebates sort of
So you think
offset.
that it helps offset to a certain extent.
Yes.
And Ava, I just want to bring you in here. I mean, all these rebates, cash handouts, CDC vouchers and all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, for your family and obviously the other parents that you speak to what extent does it help?
The handouts definitely help in terms of like the CDC vouchers for grocery shopping, for like buying food. But I think it's because it's a once-off thing, right? And there's always reoccurring costs involved, right?
Yeah, because we were talking about how wages, right, not matching up to inflation. I mean, should we then just say, companies, who are doing well should pay their workers more to help with this? And if they do, I mean, is that sustainable? I mean, are there downsides to it?
I wouldn't phrase it as helping the workers. I would say that no, they should pay the workers. So companies make profits, right? They make a good product. They have their resources and they hire workers. They make a good product. The question is, how does that profit get distributed? Who gets how much? The owners of capital or the owners of labor?
Or maybe we could shift our attention to what was in today's news about the Taiwan shipping giant Evergreen Marine, for instance. They dished out year-end bonuses of up to 52 months, okay? And then we also have Singapore-based Paradise Group. They were dishing out Rolex watches, gold bars, to a few hundred workers. Disney as well. So is that sort of practice encouraged?
it's not going to be sustainable, right? And you know that when they do things like this, of course, there is some amount of goodwill on the company's part, but they also get a lot of free publicity. So if you think about giant companies versus a worker who might be earning a decent salary, but it's just one worker nonetheless, each worker on their own have no bargaining power or very little bargaining power. So essentially what we actually need is to correct the imbalance between the owners of capital and the owners of labor, to allow them to come to the bargaining table, to the negotiating table, and say that, okay, this is what we should get, not because out of your benevolence and goodwill, but because we deserve it. It is our hard work, it is our creativity, it is our ingenuity that is creating this product that's bringing you profits. But as you said earlier, like the boss says that they're giving me a 2% raise and inflation is 6%. Like, what can I do? The only thing I can do is jump to a different job.
Or perhaps looking at what is the onus of budgeting within, is it personal responsibility versus,
No, but why should we be suckers and lie down
Yeah.
and say that, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you pay me 4% below inflation, that's fine, I'm just going to lie down and take it, right? I think that's just it's just not sustainable.
In my previous life as industrial relations officer in NTUC, there's definitely work in place to make sure that the lower wage workers are getting benefit for through progressive wage model. It's many steps. It has been benefiting the cleaners, the landscape workers, and they're trying to expand it more to other industries so that workers that we previously think that they may not have a future rising up the career ladder, now through progressive wage model, has a certain career path and certain salary that they can expect if they put in the effort and to upgrade themselves and to take on more responsibility. So I would say that there's definitely some work background trying to help the lower wage workers get better salary.
And I guess
But it's
for
not easy.
Singapore, we've always been compared to cities like New York, being one of the most expensive cities in the world. And I mean, obviously, housing, cars, services, that sort of thing is high. But we also look at how, for instance, we have a very good transportation network in Singapore. A trip from Ang Mo Kio to Chinatown, for instance, on the train, it's under $2. A meal at a hawker center, maybe $4. You can get a meal, maybe without a drink. Ava, do your parents and your friends, and when you're talking about trying to manage these expenses, do they still perceive that these daily expenses are considered high, even though public transport is available? If you want to go to the hawker center, it's still affordable.
I think generally there are a lot of options available for families, right? Whether it's a hawker center, whether it's food court, whether it's restaurants. I think generally a lot of the people that I speak with, parents, friends, they do see that it's affordable, but with young children, perhaps hawker center might not be that easy for younger children because of the baby chair settings and everything. There might be choice that they have to make to go for a restaurant, which of course is simply higher, or food court because there are options for baby chairs and so on and so forth. It's also going down to personal responsibility and budgeting as well. Like I think we've been talking about a lot of economical perspective, government policies and guidelines perspective, but individually, I do see that it's ultimately based on the lifestyles and in terms of the choices that they make. For us as family, we do not drive. We take public transport on the daily basis, like taxis, Grab.
But you do feel
MRT.
like Grab prices have gone out. I mean, tied into what
Definitely.
Oh my God, they have
what
gone
Ong
up.
EeCheng is saying, that because of the monopoly and you're kind of left, you don't have a choice.
If we compare as a family, each month, if let's say we get a car, on the average per month, the cost of having a car is like 1.5K. And on the average, that would be probably $50 per day. And if you take a taxi, which is like $10 probably, or $20, it average out, it's actually less than a day's cost of owning a car and maintaining a car. So we did our sums in terms of the cost on that. However, I think as a mom to two very young children below 6, I wish that the affordability of a car is definitely more accessible to us. Traveling with young children can be really tricky on public transport as well. So I think that's something that as a family, a middle-income family, I wish that there's an option as well. Yeah.
The government, I mean, they tailor their aid strategies, right, depending on, the households, various income, and obviously price increases differs from person to person. But which segment of society do you feel like the hardest hit and will feel, this pinch in the long run?
I definitely think that the lower wage workers will definitely feel, because they are trying to meet the month's end with the higher cost of living, especially next year when GST goes up. They will feel the pinch more. Of course, we understand that the rise in GST has an economic reason to it, is that when people come in and consume, tourists or people who earns more, they will contribute more to the revenue. But nevertheless, the low wage workers, when they consume, they will still feel the pinch.
Aside from the payouts and the benefits, what are the areas do you wish that there would be more aid in?
So I think Singapore can afford to increase the social support to those who need it. So they have the long-term assistance for people who are unable to work. And we're talking about the elderly, the disabled. I believe there are about 4,000 households. The last increase was in 2019, and then the most recent one was in 2022. So my colleague in social work, she did the math, and she determined that the increase in the payout falls below the inflation rate. So in real terms, in terms of purchasing power, the income of these people, maybe probably the bottom 5% of society, they're falling, right? And I think if we judge a society by how well we treat those who are least well off, we can do more. We can afford to do more.
I mean, everybody is feeling the pinch, and we don't know if there's sort of light at the end of the tunnel anytime soon because of the uncertain geopolitical landscape, right? I mean, what goes up should come down, but when it comes to prices, I mean, can we be a little bit optimistic here at all, or you think it's just not going to happen?
I think the government has a role to play in ensuring that the basic goods and services are affordable for the masses. So we talked about public transport, which again, the government has done a commendable job. We talked about hawker centers. That one, rents have been going up, right? So if you look at the Bukit Timah Market and Food Centre, it's slated to shut down. They are moved to an interim space for the next 5 years, but they have to sign a lease for 5 years. And the rents that they're paying are going to be much higher.
Yeah. So maybe just very quickly, what's your wish list? What are the sort of additional aid you hope to see coming in?
I have 2 children, young children, and I have my parents who are elderly. So I was hoping that that there are more help coming for sandwich generation like ours. In terms
Specifically, what's that one help you're looking at?
I would say that in terms of car affordability, because I think similar to Eva, we did our math. We realized that it's not worthwhile getting a car. I don't like to drive, but it would be good to have the option.
Especially when you have kids and you need to take them, to various locations, right? Yeah, and Ava?
I think I echo what he said, the car affordability. Yeah, I think generally it's really about helping families to adjust to the inflation of, prices. Probably childcare costs as well.
Yeah.
I think the childcare center cost has already significantly been increasing steadily throughout the 2 years. So I've seen my child's preschool increasing and will be increasing again next year.
Like it or not, we do have to cut back and we do have to find ways to, make it easier on our wallets.
Yeah, I do see it instead of feeling FOMO, probably we could adopt the mindset of being JOMO, right? Joy of missing out. Not necessarily you need to be always copying or always comparing
Following
to other
the rest.
people. And, instead of thinking of you need to go traveling every other year or every year, probably just adopting ways that we could do something similar with our family or with our children.
Okay, I think we've run out of time, but I think we've covered quite a fair bit here. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And thanks to the CNA podcast team, Tiffany Ang, Joanne Chan, Jacqueline Chan, Sa Ye Win, and Crispina Robert. I'm Otelli Edwards, signing off here.